Okay, I want you to think about your absolute favorite food. Maybe it's a perfectly crisp samosa or, a rich, juicy burger. Think about that very first bite. It is pure magic, right? But what happens by the fourth or fifth bite? I mean, it's still good, but that initial explosion of joy, it fades. We've literally all experienced this, but have you ever wondered how you'd mathematically measure that fading joy? Well, welcome to this explainer on the journey of a consumer, where we're going to use the hard logic of microeconomics to decode that exact feeling of satisfaction.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll cover the concept of utility, total versus marginal utility, and the law of diminishing utility. Then we're going to bring money into the mix with single and two-commodity equilibrium, before finally questioning our entire model with the cardinal versus ordinal approaches.
Section 1. The concept of utility. Okay, let's dive into this. The foundation of our entire economic journey starts right here, with basically the core problem of human existence. How do we satisfy our endless wants with the goods around us? So, how do we actually measure human satisfaction? Imagine you're eating that samosa, or maybe a plate of chow mein. You know it makes you happy, and you know it fills your stomach. But how on earth do we actually measure that? We can't just say, well, I feel very good. Economists need hard data. They need a concrete way to quantify that exact feeling of joy hiding inside a piece of food, a new shirt, or a smartphone. And that brings us to our first major definition. Utility is simply the want-satisfying power of a commodity. Now think about it. If you go to the store, you measure milk in liters, you measure cloth in meters, but how do you measure satisfaction? Economists invented a specific unit for this, called utils. It kind of sounds a bit funny, but it works. So instead of saying, wow, I loved that burger, you might mathematically say, that burger gave me 500 utils of satisfaction.
Section 2. Total versus marginal utility. Let's see how this concept builds when we don't just stop at one item. What actually happens to our utils when we keep eating, bite after bite, piece after piece? Now, what's really interesting about this is the difference between extra satisfaction and overall satisfaction. Let's think about marginal utility first. This represents the extra joy you get from one additional unit, say a single samosa. The first one gives you 10 utils. The second one drops to 8. Why? Because your stomach is filling up. But then consider your total utility. It's adding those numbers up, 10, then 18, then 22. So your overall satisfaction initially rises, even as the thrill of each new samosa drops.
So the math here actually gives us three strict relationships that always hold true. First, as long as your marginal utility is falling but still positive, meaning you're still enjoying the food a little bit, your total utility keeps rising. Second, when marginal utility hits 0, your total utility is at its absolute peak. And third, if someone literally forces you to eat another samosa when you're completely stuffed, your marginal utility becomes negative, and your total utility actually falls. You are physically worse off. And I really want to highlight this bold number 0. In economics, when your marginal utility hits 0, this is called the point of satiety or saturation. It is the exact precise moment your stomach is perfectly full, you do not want another bite, and your overall total utility has completely maxed out. It's peak happiness.
Section 3. Law of diminishing utility. This naturally leads us to a universal economic rule. It turns out that simple fact of getting full isn't just about food. It applies to almost everything we consume.
This is known as Hermann Gossen's first law, or as it's better known to us, the law of diminishing marginal utility. Simply put, as more and more units of a commodity are consumed, the marginal utility obtained from each new unit declines. It is the exact psychological reason why the 5th samosa, or even the 5th consecutive hour of watching a movie, never feels quite as incredible as the first.
But hold on. To make this law actually work mathematically, economists have to enforce some pretty strict assumptions. You can't just eat a burger at 9 a.m., another at noon, and a third at 3 p.m. and claim the law failed because you enjoyed them all equally. There can be no time gaps. Consumption has to be continuous. Also, the units must be standard, so eating a single crumb doesn't count, it has to be a full serving. And finally, they must be homogeneous, meaning identical. You can't swap an aloo samosa for a paneer samosa halfway through.
Section 4. Single commodity consumer equilibrium. Now that we know how satisfaction works in a vacuum, let's introduce the ultimate real-world constraint: money. How does a consumer find the perfect balance to maximize their joy without going completely broke?
Well, before we can solve that, we need to understand how we value cash. This is the marginal utility of money.
Simply put, it's what one single rupee, or $1, is worth to you personally. When you were a kid, a single coin felt like a fortune, right? As an adult, its value changes. But to keep our mathematical model from completely falling apart, economists assume that for any given scenario, the worth of a single unit of currency to a consumer remains completely constant.
So, the crucial point is finding a state of perfect balance, what we call equilibrium. This happens when the marginal utility of the good, divided by its price, exactly equals your marginal utility of money. In plain English, the satisfaction you get per rupee spent exactly matches your personal baseline value of a single rupee.
Let's break this math down in action. Say we are buying items that cost 2 rupees each. Our personal baseline value for a rupee, the MUM, is fixed at 3. Now what happens at the third unit consumed? The marginal utility there is 6. If we divide that 6 by the price of 2, we get 3. This matches our MUM of 3 perfectly. So at exactly 3 units, the consumer has maximized their satisfaction for their money. If they buy a 4th unit, the marginal utility drops to 4, and the satisfaction per rupee drops to 2. At that point, they're getting less joy than their money is actually worth to them.
Section 5. 2 Commodity-Consumer Equilibrium. Let's be real for a second. You rarely walk into a store and only have one single item to choose from. You have a budget, and you have to decide between a burger, a soda, or maybe fries.
Enter Gauss's second law, the law of equi-marginal utility. When you have 2 goods, let's just call them X and Y, you have to balance your budget across both. The consumer reaches equilibrium only when the satisfaction per rupee of good X exactly equals the satisfaction per rupee of good Y. You are essentially stretching your limited budget to squeeze out the absolute maximum amount of total joy across multiple items. And this brilliantly illustrates how testing different combinations under a strict 20 rupee budget proves our point. You could spend it all on good X, all on good Y, or a mix. But by finding where the marginal utility divided by price is equal for both, we find the sweet spot. Exactly 2 units of X for 10 rupees and 5 units of Y for another 10 rupees drains your budget perfectly while generating a massive 190 utils of total satisfaction. Any other combo for 20 rupees, it would yield less total joy.
But what if our consumer makes a mistake? What if the equation is unbalanced? Say the left side is larger. That means good X is giving them more bang for their buck. Being a rational human, they'll immediately buy more of good X and less of good Y. And because of our law of diminishing utility, eating more X makes its marginal utility drop until the equation perfectly balances out again. It is a continuous, logical balancing act to restore equilibrium. It's like a giant puzzle your brain is constantly solving.
Section 6. Cardinal versus ordinal approaches. Okay, we've just spent this entire explainer building a flawless, mathematically perfect model of human behavior. But now I want you to step back and question the very foundation of everything we just learned. Think about the food you ate today. Did you really say, wow, that gave me exactly 10 utils? Probably not. The economist Alfred Marshall believed in the cardinal approach, this idea that we can assign specific numbers to satisfaction, which is exactly what we use today to build our models. But then economists like J.R. Hicks and R.G.D. Allen argued for the ordinal approach. They said, you can't number satisfaction, you can only rank it. You might not be able to say an apple gives you 10 utils, but you can definitely say you prefer an apple over an orange.
Which leaves us with a totally fascinating dilemma. If you can't truly assign a hard number to your satisfaction, how do you rank your daily choices? How does your brain constantly calculate what to buy, what to eat, and where to spend your limited time without ever using a calculator? That shift from hard numbers to psychological rankings opens up a whole new world of economics. But we'll have to explore that in the future. I really hope you enjoyed this journey into the mind of a consumer.